The Handkerchief by Great 78. Chapter 11. Ain't That a Slap in the Face? After the Christmas break, everyone in the school seemed to notice that Potter and Weasley were angry at Hermione. It wasn't clear why to Draco, but he was sure it was the Wonderwanker's fault. The result was that he found her in the library nearly every time he entered it, a feature that suddenly seemed to draw him to the place, even more than before. Draco knew that the Slytherin common room would be non-stop party tonight, as the butterbeer, fire whiskey, and spiced vodka flowed freely. It was the night before the Slytherin versus Ravenclaw match. In the opening match, Hufflepuff had defeated Gryffindor, with Cedric Diggory catching the snitch. Then Ravenclaw had beaten Hufflepuff. Now, if Slytherin could pull off the win, they would be in the lead for the Quidditch Cup. The good thing about the Slytherin common room party was that none of his friends would find him here, and with the rift between Hermione and her friends, they were almost guaranteed peace and quiet and solitude. "Still on about the magical creatures, Granger?" he drawled as he approached her table one Friday evening, trying to make a Dementor into a pet. "If you must know, Malfoy, I'm looking for ways to save Buckbeak. I'm working with Hagrid on his defense," she huffed. Buckbeak. Was this some kind of muggle money? The hippogriff that your father once executed because of your injury? Her tone was slightly mocking and acidic, especially her last word. He said nothing, looking down and feeling sick to his stomach suddenly. "His trial is coming up soon, and I've been researching precedence cases for Hagrid. Perhaps I can go with him to present the case," she mused. "Oh, I'm not sure that's the best idea, Granger." Draco deflated. He dropped into the chair beside her. This whole hippogriff thing was out of his hands. When his father had been told of the incident, the Department of Magical Law Enforcement and the family barrister had been contacted. The wheels were set in motion. He could no sooner stop it than he could hold the Hogwarts Express back with his bare hands. "Why not? Buckbeak is innocent. You provoked him into acting defensively." She took in his troubled expression, and her voice softened. "Even if you didn't mean to." "I swear I didn't, Granger. I never expected him to rear up that way. I shouldn't have approached him so directly." He looked up into her eyes pleadingly and continued, "But my father can be persuasive in his arguments, and forceful when his mind is made up. I'm not really able to change that." "Perhaps if you talk to your father one-on-one," she began. "Granger," he cut in, You don't know my father. When his mind is made up, nothing changes it. There's no fixing this, no making it better. Believe me, my father, he's dangerous. He's a very cruel—" Draco did not finish the thought aloud. He pressed his lips together and screwed his eyes shut as though to banish the words. Bastard. Asshole. Possible murderer. He shivered at this last one, thinking of those families, the Prewetts, the McKinnons, that he'd researched years before. "Draco?" She had turned her whole body to face him, reaching out her hand to his arm, just as she had that day in the alcove. Through the haze of fear at the thought of his father's possible treachery, he felt a wave of déjà vu, almost like time had been turned back to that moment months before. He was being given the chance to live that moment again, and he wasn't going to foul it up this time. Without giving himself a moment to think about what he was doing, his hand reached for hers. He grabbed her fingers, pulling her towards him. Her eyes widened as the space between their faces narrowed. He stared into her coppery bronze eyes, trying to tell her everything in his mind and soul, without using words. "Fear him," he thought. "I'm worried for you, if you don't." Please, don't try to challenge him at this hearing. You may be brave, but he's strong, and I might care about you. Maybe a little too much." She was the first to drop her gaze, her breath resuming in quickened sips of air as though she'd forgotten the proper way to breathe. His eyes, too, fell to their hands, where their fingers had somehow gotten intertwined in the brief span of a moment. "I'm sorry," he said miserably. He wasn't sure exactly what he was apologizing for. The hippogriff, his father, holding her hand, all of it. "I am too." She dropped his hand and stood up to leave, looking down, cheeks rather pink. "If you're able to do anything to help—" I'll try to think of something," he said lamely, his silver eyes turning grey in the lengthening night shadows. When he looked up again, she was gone. The following week, Draco brooded. On the one hand, his father and several of the older Slytherins who didn't care for Hagrid were focused on killing the hippogriff and getting Hagrid fired. On the other, Draco hated to think of how sad that would make Hermione. And him, truth be told. He sent Thorn to Hagrid's hut with a large steak for Buckbeak and a flagon of wine for Hagrid. He included a note of apology to Hagrid for the whole thing, knowing that he couldn't face going down there to the hut in person. Seeing the hippogriff again would be an additional heartbreak he just wasn't prepared for. The hippogriff had acted within the norm for his species, and, additionally, had done Draco a favor. Because of his injury, he had missed the Defense Against the Dark Arts lesson that still had most of the school buzzing. Professor Remus Lupin had introduced a boggart, the shape-shifting creature that projected a person's worst fears back to them. Draco had heard everyone's craziest fears realized, and often these discussions took place behind the person's back, in a laughing manner. The fact that Marcus Flint was afraid of mice, that Seamus Finnegan feared banshees, that Daphne Greengrass thought that missing a dance step during her lessons with Madame Chantreuse was the height of horror, were all the sources of greatest amusement to their classmates. Draco did not know what his worst fear would manifest as, and he was very glad that it was not broadcast for everyone in Slytherin and Gryffindor houses to learn. In his heart of hearts, he was afraid that everyone would see his father aiming his wand, or his fists, or a fireplace poker at him. It was a shame that both Draco and Lucius could not endure. Somehow, word had gotten around this week that Harry Potter's boggart was a Dementor. Apparently, some Ravenclaw had passed by the Defense Against the Dark Arts classroom door one evening, and had spotted it through the window. The Slytherins were trying to outdo each other in coming up with ridiculous plans to scare him by dressing up as Dementors. Some thought to sneak into the Gryffindor Tower and scare him on the night before the next Gryffindor Quidditch match, but no one knew the password. Some suggested doing it in the library, but Draco rightly pointed out that Potter hardly ever went to the library. One suggested luring him to the Astronomy Tower, or the Forbidden Forest, but these ideas seemed needlessly complex. Finally, it was Pansy, listening to their machinations from across the Slytherin common room, who told them to keep it simple, just go and do it wherever Potter is. So it was decided to do it Saturday, during the Quidditch match between Ravenclaw and Gryffindor. Next was working out the logistics, the who and the how. There was no shortage of black sheets in Slytherin dormitories, but Dementors were extremely tall. None of them could fly, and a Dementor on a broom sounded a bit silly. It was Blaise who suggested trying stilts, a skill at which it turned out Gregory Goyle was excellent. No one else was able to master it, so Draco decided to volunteer to sit on Crabbe's shoulders. It was a reckless plan, one that would earn him detention at best and expulsion at worst. But Draco saw a potential silver lining. If he was on punishment, it might distract Lucius enough that he would forget about the issue with the hippogriff. And after all, hadn't Lucius divulged his fair share of pranks and misdeeds during his time at Hogwarts? He might even be a bit proud of Draco, for once. His father was not proud. Lucius's face when he came through the flue of Professor Snape's office was a livid red. The phrases, "shame upon the house of Slytherin," and "besmirching the name of Malfoy," clanged in his head. He went to bed that night, embarrassed, ashamed, and wanting to sink through his bed, into the floor, and not get up again. But the worst had been immediately after the Quidditch match had ended. Draco lay on the ground, dazed, a tangle of black sheets and limbs and broken stilts around him. Looking up, he'd seen the severe face of Professor McGonagall, pinched and angry, practically spitting fire. Behind her stood Hermione, who looked at him with unshed tears brimming in her eyes. As Professor McGonagall moved off to rail at Professor Snape, Hermione bent close. "How could you? I thought better of you, Malfoy. What kind of circus was all of this?" She gestured around at all the chaos. "You shouldn't, Granger," he said groggily. "Don't think better of me. But yet, don't even think of me. I shouldn't even cross your mind, Mudblood." He had said it to hurt her. If he hurt her feelings now with his words, there could be no chance of her hurting his heart later. Because now, looking up at Hermione, the bleak sun peeking out from behind a cloud and lighting her beatifically from behind like some sort of Muggle religious painting, Draco knew he liked her too much. He did not yet know what love was. He was a few months shy of his 14th birthday, for Salazar's sake. Love was something for adults, not teenagers like himself. But he liked her, more than a little, probably had for a long time, and that was not good for her. Not good for either of them. The next few weeks were some of the roughest that Draco had yet been through at Hogwarts. Lots of the girls in the school, even a few from Slytherin, had caught wind of Buckbeak's upcoming execution at the behest of Lucius Malfoy, and they blamed Draco that the pretty bird thing was going to die by beheading. The mean looks and words were enough that Draco was certain he wouldn't get a date with any girl in the school in the near future. The Slytherin Quidditch team was angry at him because the Dementor prank had gone so badly. He had several detentions with Professors McGonagall and Sprout, either sorting buttons and pincushions and teacups by colour and type for Transfigurations class, or refilling flower pots for herbology with newly declumped, by Draco, Farmer McPoyle's magical soil, which Draco was 99% sure was just unicorn and thunderbird poop mixed together. Professor Snape was angry at him. His father was righteously pissed off. His mother was just disappointed. And Harry Potter and his merry band of asshole Gryffindors were riding high off their win against Ravenclaw, and they were gunning for Slytherin next. That jerk, Oliver Wood, sneered in his face every time they'd pass each other in the corridor. Even the Weasel had gotten in with a few jabs at Draco, going on about how we're going to win the cup, even though he personally had precisely zero to do with determining the winner of the Quidditch Cup. And the awful cherry on the Knickerbocker glory was this: Hermione was doing exactly what he had told her to do, apparently not thinking of him at all. She didn't look at him, didn't acknowledge him in the slightest. When other people teased him, it was like she didn't even hear it. He had gotten exactly what he wanted, for her to leave him the hell alone. And as precisely anyone could have predicted except him, he realized now, it was nothing like what he wanted. It turned out that her ignoring him made her even more attractive to him. Where before Draco may have had only a handful of dreams about girls, nameless, faceless, vaguely sexual, he was now vividly dreaming mainly about Hermione, and in very specific ways that made it very hard to concentrate when he thought of them at inopportune moments during class. More than once he'd had to make excuses to stay behind after class and wait for his hard-on to subside after catching her sucking on a sugar quill, or sticking her tongue between her teeth whilst working out a difficult arithmancy problem, or pulling her hair back before beginning a complex potion. In truth, a good stiff breeze might provoke such a reaction these days in him, but with Hermione it happened nearly every day now, sometimes more than once a day. It had become nearly impossible to make it a full week without having to step into a restroom for a quick wank between classes. He was having to ask the house elves to change his sheets nearly every day in the dormitories. It was, to put it succinctly, altogether embarrassing. The only friends who still seemed enamored with the old Draco swagger were Vince and Greg. They had been happy to be included in the whole Quidditch prank, and Draco appreciated their unswerving followership. He made sure to play up the whole Hagrid's a stupid oaf, and Buckbeak deserves to get killed around the pair of them. It was this kind of attempt to bolster his own standing that finally garnered Hermione's attention once again, but not at all in the way that he'd hoped. Draco and the two Slytherins had been walking back to the castle from flying one day in June. Greg and Vince were laughing about Hagrid, who was upset about the Hippogriff's hearing. They'd stopped just inside the front doors to listen to Hagrid blow his nose in anguish, and Draco commented on the pathetic absurdity of it all, now that he was out of Hagrid's earshot, when Hermione seemed to appear from nowhere. She rushed at Draco with the anger and force of a banshee. Before he was aware of it, she had hauled back her hand and slapped him, hard, right across his face. "Don't you dare call Hagrid pathetic! You foul! You evil!" Her Gryffindor cronies weakly pulled her back, looking just as shocked as Draco felt. Then she pulled out her wand, and Draco knew things were possibly about to go from bad to worse. He looked up and met her eyes. Anger flashed there in the copper rings, but there was something more. Hurt. All of the emotions of the last few weeks seemed to hit him at once. Fear, anger, disappointment, and shame, and longing. He knew that he was unable to stop them as they flooded his face, then his eyes. Before the tears could fall, he muttered, "Come on," to Greg and Vince, and the three of them set off towards the dungeons. Along the way, the two other boys discussed brutish plots for revenge against Hermione. "We're gonna beat her and Potter up for you, Draco, don't worry," Vince started in, pounding his meaty fists together. But Draco shut them down with finality. "No one touches her. She's mine. I'll take care of it," he said with what he hoped sounded like a threat, and not a promise. And he would. He would figure out a way to make this up to her. Somehow. Someday. He hoped. Thank you for listening to this chapter of The Handkerchief by Great 78.